So I would like to introduce Ari, who generally needs no introduction, but he's a good friend of mine. We've been friends since, when did you guys open?
1982.
82.
Yeah.
Woo! Give him a hand for that. And they were in that little spot where they still sell lots of bread and cheese and all kinds of goodies now. And I met Ari. He was, I think, behind the counter slicing some meat. And I was so excited to have a Jewish deli in town. And but it turned out to be much more than a Jewish deli. And Ari is really one of the foremost food experts, giving talks and everything, and also about service and self-discipline and self-awareness. He's presented all over the world, and we're really proud to have him as an Ann Arborite. So let's hear it for Ari. Ari, why don't you take it away? He's going to go to about 9:30.
You want to sit down, or are you going to go on there? I don't need that. You got me? Come on. Okay, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Coach, I'll be glad to donate some books for the. Remind me, please.
That's what
I'm sorry, Ari, we need the microphone. We're tied into your system.
Your what?
We're tied into your system.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're going to try to figure this out. I'm a clip-on because I talk with my hands.
One hand.
And I move around a lot, so mic stands don't work. But I'm going to endeavor to do this the best I can. Okay, I wasn't going to say this, but to Coach's point, my loving business partner, Paul Saginaw, who many of you know, taught me many, many years ago that you can't motivate anybody. Because to her point, who motivates people is yourselves. And Paul always says, when we hire people, they're on their first day, they're as motivated as they're ever going to be. Our job is to demotivate them as little as possible. It's a good way to look at it. My good friend Gareth Higgins, who was just here, he's from Ireland. He writes. I would highly recommend all of his work. We taught a 2-day Zing Train session on stories and beliefs, which I'm not going to teach you today, but is fascinating and comes out of the beliefs book that I did and out of his work. He says that the story we tell about ourselves and our place in the world is the single most important element in determining our happiness and the kind of life we will lead. So this is a little bit of my story. It's in the new chapbook. Every once in a while, it happens. In the middle of a conversation about the struggles of leadership or the challenges of running a small business, a curious person will shift gears and ask me something along the lines of, how does it feel to be such a successful entrepreneur? I usually smile and deflect the compliment with a bit of heartfelt humility. Thank you, you're very kind. Time and mental space allowing, though, I might answer the question in a bit more depth. To be honest, I don't really think of myself as either a success or an entrepreneur. The typical response is something akin to, really? How do you think of yourself then? For years, I fumbled around for an answer. Eventually, I realized I could just tell the truth. I feel like a line cook who's doing pretty well. Well, Sierra puts that up there, so that's true. It took me 43 years to write it down and stop being awkward and deflecting things as I went. Okay, let's we gotta move this. My donation to the Roadhouse is going to be to buy a clip-on mic so I can talk. Okay. Good. I'll let you tighten it up. Okay. So this little chapbook came out a few months ago. It's the smallest thing I've ever written. Compared to this 600-page book on beliefs, which I like to look at as like the War and Peace of business books, it's like a little espresso shot. You have on your seats or in your hands, there's a little handout that's from the middle of the chapbook. It's the life lessons. because the chapbook is called Life Lessons I Learned from Being a Line Cook. You also have another sheet, which is a life lesson that I learned from being writing life lessons that I learned from being a line cook. That's not in the chapbook. And I'm going to spend most of the time today on the lesson that's not in the chapbook, because you can read the chapbook, but this isn't in it. Sound all right? Okay, and then for those of you who haven't heard me speak, I'm very informal, interrupted well. There's no formal Q&A. It's hard for you in the middle. You're like on an airplane, but you can get more food. And we're very collaborative here, so I have a feeling the people on the end would be happy to get you something else if you don't want to get up in the middle. Sound all right? Okay, and then last, before I get going, my email's ari@zingermans.com for the 6 people in the room who don't already have it. And I do an e-news every week, which is where a lot of this work started. If you don't get it now, email me and I will send it back to you and you can sign up. Super simple. So, Carol Sanford, anybody heard of her work? So somehow I never heard of her work. I've read like, I don't know, a gazillion and a half books, and I got a gazillion and a half more piled up to read. But I never heard of Carol Sanford. She just passed away in early December at the age of 85. I've read all 6 of her books in the last 6 months, and somebody gifted me one of them last summer. She said that to know something requires us not isolating it, but rather being with it in an attitude of respect and attempted understanding. And that's what I want to suggest the life lessons that I got out of line cooking are really about. And I didn't understand that when I started line cooking. I just didn't want to go home after graduating with my Russian history degree from U of M. I had no vision, only what David White, W-H-Y-T-E, the poet and writer whose books I would highly recommend, calls the via negativa. Some of you might have experienced this, even if you never heard the term. It's where you're clueless about where you want to go, but you're super clear on where you don't want to go. I wouldn't really recommend it as a great path to greatness, but it worked out for me. I didn't want to go home. In order to not go home, I needed a job. I'd driven a taxi part-time while I was in school. Those of you who are my age and have been around town, it was Vets, which were the blue and red ones. It was fine, but not particularly interesting. One of my college roommates was a waiter at Maud's. Some of you will remember that. I knew nothing about restaurants or business. In fact, I had pretty negative beliefs about business. At the time, I just needed a job. I grew up, as per the pamphlet on food and philosophy, which is not today's talk, I grew up on Kraft macaroni and cheese, Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, Pop-Tarts, Tang, Nestle's Quick, American Singles, Captain Crunch. Anybody else? So I was not destined to be doing what I'm doing. I have friends who grew up knowing they were going to own restaurants, knowing that they were going to cook their grandmother's recipes and bring it to the world. That ain't me. My mother really wanted me to go to med school, but I fell asleep in chemistry every morning for the first week, dropped the class, and that was the end of pre-med. Then she really wanted me to go to law school, and there's probably a few attorneys in the room I won't ask, but one of the good things of law school is you can major in anything as undergrad and still go to law school. So it didn't really matter, and it got everybody off my back while I majored in Russian history. When I got a job, my first job was at Maud's washing dishes. I tried for server, they didn't hire me. I went back 2 weeks later after they said they'd call. I reapplied as a busser. Once again, they interviewed me and said they'd call. Once again, they didn't. And so at the end of the month, rent was coming due. My anxiety was getting higher. I went back a third time, which we now know is called emotional resilience. And I said I would do anything, and they offered me a job washing dishes, and that's how I started. So that entree, fairly quickly, I was a pretty good dishwasher, evolved into line cooking, and so starting to line cook, little did I know, was going to change my life, and that's really what's in the chapbook. Meanwhile, my mother was very depressed about it. When do you take the LSAT? In the fall? Nobody knows. In the fall. So I think it's August. Every August or July, every year she'd start going, why don't you just take the LSAT? And then in case you want to go to law school, you'll be ready. She was very bummed out because she was really convinced that I was wasting my education. But little did she know, nor did I know, that little job cooking the line, which I took to kill time while I figured out what to do, was going to turn into the education that she wanted. And I'm not saying this because I want to make her happy, but because I think it's a life lesson that anybody could benefit from, and that I wish I had understood a long time ago, and I feel very fortunate to understand it now. It took 47 years, but here I am. I've come to really look at line cooking. For me, it's sort of like one of those little fairy doors. Not like the faux fairy doors, but like in Ireland, where fairies are a really big deal. So from afar, and for those who don't know, it just looks like a tiny little thing that seems irrelevant. But when you are willing to be humble and to go through it, there's a whole nother world on the other side. And that's what line cooking turned into for me. And my point today is not that you should be a line cook. It's that any job can make that real, whether it's softball, being a sous chef, being a lawyer, being anything. And that through what I'm going to share with you in a little bit about the idea of deep understanding, we can make something really special happen. And I'm going to suggest that right now we need that more than ever. Any job, I've come to really believe, hi Christian, any job can just be a job. And that's the story that most of us are told, is that if you do the job really well, you'll make a lot of money, or pretty good money, and you'll find a stable life, and things will go well, and you'll retire, and I don't think that's bad. But I think there's another story that we're not getting told, and that's how much more is possible from the same work. And because we're not looking for it, we don't find it. And I got lucky because I did. And I don't mean I didn't work for it. Everybody in this room worked for what they got. It didn't happen by accident. It's not like I woke up one day and all this became clear. But the point is that if you don't even know that it's out there, why would you do it? Michael Dickman is a poet. He was just here a few weeks ago. He's at Princeton now, but he used to be a cook at the deli. He did a little talk here. We've been working on another talk on poetic approach to leadership, but we'll come back to that in a future LeadersConnect. But anyway, he said the result of this cannot be imitated or repeated. The result cannot be imitated or repeated. The point is not to be who your mother wanted you to be, or who I want you to be, or the coach wants you to be, or Rob wants you to be. It's to find a way to be ourselves in a way that helps the world. So I'm going to come back to all that. This is where I get challenged by having a stable mic and not a clip-on mic. So, the chapbook. There's 18 lessons on that little sheet. You have them right here. None of them will shock you. But what's kind of shocking for most line cooks is that it's not just about line cooking and getting better at sauteing and salting. And that most people look at a job like line cooking as drudgery. At best, it's kind of okay and people treat you fairly well. And there are many who have high aspirations, aspire to become chefs and become famous, and I'm not saying that's bad, but you can become famous and not do this. They're not mutually exclusive either. But the point is that there's life lessons I want to suggest in everything, and I happen to get these out of standing field line cook, but like I said, you could get it out of being a second grade teacher. And the point is that we're looking and that we're doing the work to make these happen. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of these if you want, but I'm also happy to move into what I want to share is my understanding that I never had up until 4 or 5 months ago. So let me pause. Is this making any sense? Am I scaring you? Boring you? Okay, questions on any of these 18 life lessons? And then I'll get to the 19th secret lesson that's through the fairy door.
15, live with paradox.
Yeah, 15, I'm going to repeat it. 15 is live with paradox, and the question is, what is it? So, I grew up, wanting the world to be black and white. There's a right answer and a wrong answer, but I'm going to suggest this taught me that the reality is it's almost all paradox. And cooking and restaurants, it's full of them, right? So, if you come in for dinner tonight and there were 4 of you and we closed the entire restaurant and served only you, it would be a better meal. It just would. But the problem is we'd have to charge you like $3,000 a plate in order to make it work. We're all trapped, not in a bad way, we're all bounded by these paradoxes of trying to make everything better, but knowing that we're compromising at the same time. We're all, I would imagine when you're coaching players, you've got to let a young player play, even though you know that the other player would be better in the moment, but you'll never get to the future unless you compromise by letting the new player, the younger player, get in the game. That's true in all of our lives. We're always pushing the envelope to make things better, but that makes us raise prices. So this really taught me to let go of the black and white and to just do my best to live in the paradox, which is not easy, but is, I think, really important, because when I wasn't living in the paradox, I was lashing out against the world, angry that it wasn't black and white, and that wasn't all that helpful. Yes, sir.
Make history come alive?
Yeah, make history come alive is an awesome one for right now. Well, dude, I'm a history major, so that's... But here's what I learned. So, I'm weird
Go on.
in many ways. And I love history. So, I don't know a lot about the history of baseball, but if I start studying it, I'll read like 8 books on the history of baseball, and I'll find you all these life lessons in the history of baseball. What I learned is most people aren't that interested in history. I'm weird. But here's the thing. When you're eating the food, everybody's really interested. So, the cooking and the food gave me a vehicle to make history come alive for people. I'll tell you a real life piece of history that will elucidate some of the issues that are challenging our country. Carolina Gold rice is on the menu here for 21 years. Has anybody had it? Okay, so that rice is awesome. So in the previous context of number 15 about paradox, we pay like 20 times more to buy that rice than we would to put visually comparable white rice from Cisco on your plate. And you wouldn't, on the surface, even notice, because you just expect white rice. But here's the story of that rice. So in New England, people really did go for religious freedom. We'll pass over the colonial issues and what happened to the people who were already there. But there was an effort to create a space where they could practice their religion without oppression. South Carolina was mostly started to make money. It was like some, the 17th century equivalent of some business school students going, dude, what are we going to do? And they tried a lot of things, olive oil, sesame oil. None of them worked, but rice worked. The problem was they didn't actually know how to grow rice very well, because rice didn't grow in Europe, but people in West Africa and the region of Senegambia were quite skilled at it. They had the technology called Trunk and Dyke. If you want to read about this, Judith Carney's book, Black Rice, is all about it. And so they started to spec people for enslavement from Senegambia. And because that rice, which we know as Carolina gold, and they knew too, became so famous, it's called gold because it was gold in the sun, in the husk. And the field was shipped to the royal courts of Europe, to the best restaurants in New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., et cetera, et cetera. And it made a lot of money for a lot of people. And South Carolina had the highest ratio of enslaved people to European planters, Europeans in the then early United States. After emancipation, of course, there was no more free labor. Like all the heirlooms that we work with that Tantre Farms grows that you could have at that dinner next month, it's very expensive. And so when the free labor went away, production dropped off. It disappeared in 1920. They found seeds in a seed bank in the year 2000. There's a half dozen, 8-10 people growing it. One of them is Anson Mills. That's who we buy it from. It's all grown organically, field ripened, left in. So they store it at super freezing temperatures after it's ripened, and then they mill when we order. So it has the oil left in. That's part of the history. Then, I'm not here to argue reparations, but after this I'll move on. But just to show you how the history comes alive, do you think people got back pay when they had emancipation? Okay, and some of you are better at math than I am, but you could do the math on 170 years of interest on the back pay people didn't get. And even a history major could see there's inequity. So that's just one example, but we could go into really wild rice, which is the essential food of the Ojibwe people. Every food story has all these things that come alive. And my experience is when people are eating it, they're really interested. And it's allowed me, like who's had the sweet potato fries here? They come from the Gullah tradition. Hardly anybody in the United States knows who the Gullah people are, but it's the most African influenced place in the United States. It was the first place liberated when the Civil War started. The white planters fled. This is right at the beginning. They left the previously enslaved Africans there, so there's still dialect, culture, cooking, all around that. So every time you eat the sweet potato fries, gives me an entree into telling that story. Does that help? Okay, one more, then we're going to move on. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think there's something else that you don't have on this list that you alluded
I'm sure there is.
That you alluded to.
What is it?
Well, I think you learned from your mother, from her saying, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be a lawyer. What you learned is what you should do is you should follow your passion.
Well, the question is about I learned to follow my passion. That's kind of true, but I had zero passion for cooking or business when I started.
But you discovered it.
Yes, but, and here's what I'll say as not opposition to that, but so many people in school are getting taught to follow their passion. Can I swear in here? So they're all walking around going, I need to find my fucking passion, and they can't fucking find it, and then they're depressed. And what I want to say is it's the opposite, and I'm going to use that as an entree to deep understanding. It's diving in that brings the passion. Like some people have the passion, don't get me wrong. Like I have friends who, like, I'm telling you, from the time they were 9, they loved cooking, or they wanted to be a surgeon from the time they were 10, and it's awesome. But my experience is that's like 1 out of 10 people, and the other 9 of us are like going, we don't know what the hell to do.
Yeah, amen.
And then we're like 35, and we're like, our life sucks because we haven't found our passion yet. And we're like looking in the closet. We're going to classes like this, looking for the passion, and we can't
I
find.
feel singled out. I feel singled
No, man, it's endemic. There's way more. It's just that nobody wants to say it because they feel like there's something wrong with them. And I'm saying there's nothing wrong with you. It's in all of us. So you're right. I did follow it, but I made it.
Well, see, I found mine at age 9.
Okay, there you go. You're the 1 in 10. And I think that's awesome. But the other 9 of us are walking around going, we don't, like things are pretty good. There's nothing wrong. But we can't find that passion. Sir?
I'm curious, and I don't know if this was the case for you, but for a lot of people I know have been successful, it has been. when did you learn to pay attention? Because that's what I see here in these 18, is that you started to pay attention.
Well, here's the good thing. Y'all are making, the question is about attention that's not on the list. And so here's what I'll say is y'all are actualizing my point in a wonderful way, which is you're finding your own life lessons in my life lessons, and that's awesome. Because when did I learn to pay attention? I don't know. There's many things I resisted my mother. One good thing is that she took us to the library when we were like 2, and I learned how to read, and I'm an awkward, geeky introvert who's anxious in groups larger than 3. It just got really difficult to lead a large organization without talking to anybody, so I trained myself how to do this. And then, you know, now I've spoken to thousands of people, but it's not my passion or my nature. It goes against my nature. It just became necessary to get to the vision. So I don't know. I started reading, and then because I'm an awkward introvert, the only place I'm actually not super anxious is sitting alone, preferably in the sun, with a book. And I got a whole car back seat full of books, and I got a bag full of books, and I never go anywhere without them because I'm just convinced there's an answer in the book. I would say on here, the little things make a big difference is about attention. A tiny bit of salt, too light or too heavy in line cooking can ruin your meal. And it's like literally a penny or 2 pennies worth of salt, but undersalted anything tastes bland. Oversalted, you won't be able to eat it. It's very difficult to do well. So like all of those things, and then the second one, and then I'll move into deep understanding, is live every day with awe and wonder. Those are the little things. Like I never won a championship, and I'm sure it's awesome, and there's a level of awe, but if you're waiting for that championship, it's a long fucking wait. And the people who get there find the awe. I would suggest in the freshman who gets a single when people didn't think they could do it. It's seeing the tiny little things. It's seeing somebody who works here suddenly get it, and they start to click with what we're doing. It's seeing somebody just provide an amazing guest experience that blows the guest away. It's the family that was here the other night, who I didn't know. They were here for dinner, and I was pouring water, and I happened to be back the next morning, and there they were. The same family from the night before. Like in the food business, there is no, like this isn't like they're at the Holiday Inn in the middle of nowhere and there was nowhere else to go. There's 1,000 places they could go. Like that's awe-inspiring for me. And so those tiny little things are what make a difference. So those first 2, I think, are different entrees into what you're saying. So I'm going to shift you to the other page, which is this one that you have. And I learned this from Carol Sanford's 5 months ago. So, 5 years ago last week, many of you have kind of blocked it out. We had the jelly bean jump up dinner for Safe House to raise money. And the next day, the world shut down. Our sales dropped in half within a week. I felt like my business life was passing in front of my eyes. I had no idea what was going to be happening 2 or 3 months later. You were all there in your own way. If I would have gone to med school, I could have been in one of those labs trying to help save the world, but I didn't know how to do that, and I never made it to med school, as you already know. Vic Strecker, who's not here today, but is awesome and teaches public health, and half of you know, has always teased me. Well, he wasn't, I took it as teasing, but he was serious that we're in public health. And I'd always go, yeah, whatever. And that week, I realized we were in public health. 5 weeks later, we've been running this organization by consensus of the partners for 30 years last year. It's a business story that nobody tells because it doesn't fit their belief system about the heroic dictatorial business leaders who happen to be nice instead of mean. We've been running by consensus of whatever was in the room, 18 of us, I think, we decided we were going to stay open no matter what. Unless we absolutely could not. Even though the truth is, we probably could have just closed, gone away on holiday, and lost the same amount of money. Which I had friends who did, and I'm not judging them, but we just decided that our role in the community was too important. Because we provided a safe space for people. And there's people who I know of now who told me later that the only human, they were whatever, older, immunocompromised, the only human contact they had was like pulling up to the drive-up window or going to the deli to get a pickup order for 2 years. I'm going to suggest, without trying to be super controversial, that we're in a new pandemic right now. It's a spiritual pandemic. And I'm going to suggest that we have the same role to play, which is, I didn't go to law school. So I'm not in court, and I don't know how to draw up all those appeals for restraining orders or whatever all that stuff is. But I know how to create, hopefully, an imperfect organization that creates a safe space for people where good ideas can emerge. Timothy Snyder is a historian, so one of the ways to bring history alive is that leadership in countries is the same as leadership in companies. People don't connect it, but it's exactly the same. And the Vladimir Putin model of leadership is not uncommon in companies. And people think it's two different things, but it's not. It's just a bigger scale. With people aren't dying or getting in prison, but they're still getting treated in much the same way. Timothy Snyder is a historian that has done what I'm going to suggest is deep understanding. He's at Yale. He's a historian of Ukraine, but because he spent his entire life studying autocracy, he's better able to understand what's going on than most people in the U.S. who haven't studied it, have thankfully never lived in it. But he's lived in it, and he spent much of his time in Eastern Europe, etc. He says to normalize what is happening is to take part in the change. For a writer, normalization means pretending that the same concepts that once applied still do apply. When we do that, we destroy the concept. For an unfamiliar politics, we will need experimentation. And I think that's true. And I'm going to suggest that this idea of deep understanding is an entree, a fairy door into that experimentation. I don't know what you'll find. I don't have the answers. I'm just trying to do a good job and provide a dignity-based place for people to be. But Carol Sanford taught me about this idea of deep understanding. She said, basically, like, you could be a really good line cook. You could be a great line cook. But that's not deep understanding. That's understanding. You could be a great lawyer, you could be a great teacher, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's not a criticism, but there's more behind the fairy door if we go through it that we're not told to even look for. And I just want to open that door to say there's more out there, and that's what I found. I found the passion, but I wasn't really looking for it. It's just doing the work, paying attention, and all the life lessons that are on there. Carol Sanford said, to understand anything requires an inner shift, a willingness to immerse ourselves in experience, allowing whatever we are studying, whether it's line cooking or softball, to fully enter our awareness, to become illuminated by reflection and therefore change us. To understand anything requires an inner shift, a willingness to immerse ourselves in experience, allowing whatever we are studying to fully enter our awareness, become illuminated by reflection, and thereby change us. I am changed by this work. It didn't happen in a day. I didn't even know it was happening. But it's from doing the things that are on there, on that little chapbook list that you have. Is this making any sense? Okay, so part of what I've learned to do over the years is to take other people's ideas and not copy them, because that's the antithesis of this, but to create new understanding from what I learned from them. I like to give credit because I didn't make things up. It's just what Stash Kazmierski, who some of you knew, who taught us the visioning and changed our lives, and that's a whole nother class. He taught us to adapt, not adopt. So my point of these life lessons is not to tell you, dude, just go follow those 18 life lessons and it's going to be fine. My point is the inverse. Find your own life lessons. They'll not be dissimilar. We all kind of share values or we wouldn't be in this room together. But the point is, it's for you to discover, not for me to tell you or your mother to tell you or anybody else. There's no expert in you except you. That's my lesson. So here's what I want to suggest. When we go beyond just understanding and being good at what we do, we get to deep understanding. And the four things that are on this other page are what I believe happens when we get there. We take an existing area of knowledge, a magazine, teaching, writing, it doesn't matter, it's in everything, banking. So we're working in, we didn't make up the field, like I didn't invent line cooking. There's I don't know how many millions of line cooks in the United States. But we take an existing area of knowledge and we adapt it, connect it with new learnings to make something new. So it's not like we invented the field, like you didn't invent teaching third grade, but there's a way to take teaching third grade and take it to a new place that's on the other side of that ferry door. And it's by connecting things that aren't otherwise connected. It's by adapting it into new formats, etc., to make something special. I'm going to suggest Timothy Snyder, if you study his work, has done that because he could just be in a classroom teaching the history of Ukraine, but instead, if you watch the news, he's become one of the most, I think, insightful commentators on the current situation in the world. And he didn't seek that fame. They're chasing him because he actually understands it in a new way. The third thing is that when we do attain deep understanding, we're improving the lives of other people. That's the key. And so I didn't do this alone. This is me and Paul and thousands of people that have made, including you, that have made Zingerman's what it is. However, it would be disingenuous to pretend that what I learned has not contributed to that in some way. So what you're experiencing in our organization, which there's none like in the whole world. I'm not saying it's better, just saying there's none like it in the whole world, came out of, in hindsight, what I didn't understand, but now I do, is deep understanding. And a whole lot of lives, clearly, imperfectly, we mess up daily, have been made better because of that work. Okay, and then the fourth thing, which is what you're asking, is you become yourself in a meaningfully positive way that you wouldn't have without that deep understanding. I didn't understand any of this. When I started cooking the line, dude, I just wanted to not overcook the burgers and figure out how to clean the grill good so they didn't yell at me. But my belief is that any field of work has the opportunity to create this. You gotta look for it. I'm gonna pause. I was thinking, Rob, I was gonna give them 5 minutes to talk in pairs or trios and just reflect on what this means.
Yeah, I like that.
And then I'm gonna have them come back and finish my stuff.
Yeah, you should do it. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, there you go. Rob gave me the thumbs up. So I'm going to suggest, I've just put a lot out there. You might hate it, you might be intrigued, you might be confused. I don't really know. But take a few minutes, connect with the person near you. If you don't like talking to the one you came with because you're related to them, you could turn around and talk to a different person because you might be an introvert like me and you're more comfortable talking to people you'll never see again. Or you might be like, no, I came with my best friend and I really want to talk to them. I don't really care who you talk to, but 2s or 3s. And I'll give you 5-6 minutes, see what you come up with. And then we'll go to questions and more info. Sound all right? Okay. Thoughts, reactions, freakouts, questions, curiosities?
I guess we had two. One was
Okay.
around
kind of the stories you tell and having communication kind of gets to changing beliefs and creating understanding by talking rather than exchanging emails or exchanging red lines
Oh,
and
yeah,
whatnot.
that's
And
Okay,
the second
I'll
thing-
repeat it, but I gotta figure out what the
how to do it.
what the espresso shot of the question is.
Oh, do you want to? Okay, I can pause. Or-
No, no.
Okay, so the
Then
second
give me
one-
a give me a six.
Short.
Yeah.
The sign of a good leader being able to hold conflicting views at the same time, as opposed to that black and white that you were talking about.
Yeah, the question is about being able to hold conflicting views. I don't know. I don't know. David Bohm, the physicist, writes a lot about that. That the opposite of a, I'm going to paraphrase, but the opposite of a great truth is another truth. So I think it's paradox for me. And like I said, learning to cook really taught me that, because it's all imperfect and we're getting better. You want to do well, but you absolutely need the rest of the team to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, that, yes, I think trying to impose black and white on the world, which I certainly did when I was 18, didn't work that well. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, can I say one thing?
You can ask too, Rob. It's your show.
I'm not going to ask you to get out your phones and take some pictures or video clips so we can share these on social media, because especially some of the 10-second gems from Ari. So you go to the next one, 10 seconds of gems.
The pressure's on now.
So please,
Yes.
feel
Well,
free.
something that we talked about was listening.
Yeah.
And the reality is, people in school when they're little are never taught how to listen. People hear, but they don't listen. And very often it doesn't happen until graduate school or until you're in a company that actually offers instruction on that.
Or never.
It's one thing to hear and it's another thing to listen. And listening is the ability that really enables you to work with others and respond in a meaningful way.
Yes, it was a very good promotion for listening. I couldn't agree more. I grew up in a family where nobody listened. Everybody talked at the same time. It's very uncomfortable for me. I'm much more comfortable when me and Paul are going at it and we're both cutting each other off. It works fine for us because we both grew up in the same style, but it's terrible with most people who believe you're not listening to them. In my family, if they didn't cut you off, it's because they weren't listening. Well, these are just beliefs, but I agree with you. Brenda Ueland, U-E-L-A-N-D, whose book from 1938, If You Want to Write, Changed My Life, it's a whole other conversation. She said, listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. And to your point, she said, when we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. Ideas actually begin to grow within us and come to life. So yes, I agree. I'm always working on it. I'll never get to where I really want to go, but I'm trying. Sir.
And that is a great segue to what we spent time talking about, is it never, number 18,
Yeah.
it's never done.
Yeah.
It never ends. Once
Yeah.
you reach that, and Coach had a great,
It's just not, nothing's finite.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where you get to the championship, now what? You know, how do you grow?
Not about
Well, they know.
It's not about the
Yeah.
championship.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
So,
when you find out,
Yeah.
what's next?
although it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool. It's just what I always say about, like, I don't really care about winning awards. It's not like the organization feels good and the people feel good and more people come and buy stuff because you won them. But whatever, like, we're no worse the day after or the day before if we won it or didn't win it. And I don't work any less hard if we win it or we don't win it. And that's the self-discipline. Tina Grotzer, who teaches at Harvard, who I don't know, but I read some of her stuff. She said deeper understanding is a journey, not a destination. And so deep understanding, as I understand it, it's not a degree program. The fairies aren't going to come and put the pin on you. And I'm not saying because I understood the only reason I came to understand this idea of deep understanding from Carol Sanford is because I'm always trying to understand more and keep going. And to pursue deep understanding. So I want to just share a few things with you. At the bottom of the page, to the best of my limited ability, and I've only begun to study this, these are the things that I believe lead toward deep understanding. None of them will be shocking. You've mentioned all of them in one form or another. It's a lot of work. Like you can't order deep understanding online. It does require working through lots of pain, lots of awkwardness, lots of discomfort. Everybody in this room is old enough to have done that. There's more coming.
That's one of the things that we touched on, is there is suffering in this.
Absolutely.
It's different than finding passion.
There's suffering in all of this. Absolutely. And when we're taught that that's bad or you're a failure because you're feeling it, that's not helpful. Part of how I met Rob was getting in a men's group when I started going to therapy 35 years ago, which I believe made me a failure, but it actually contributed to being who I am. Pursuit of mastery. This is what the coach is talking about. This means that you know you're not going to get to perfection. You just keep going after it and after it and after it. Humility. You got to be humble to know that there's more to learn, and you need to be curious. None of these are shocking. Perseverance or emotional resilience, of course. It is a lot of reflection. And we're in a world where people are looking at Instagram. I mean, nothing against Instagram, but they're like looking for the 60-second soundbite. And then the work becomes to send the soundbite to 60 other people who send it, and it's like, whatever, fine. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it's not going to get people to deep reflection. And whether that's reading or meditating or running or talking to your best friend or walking in the woods, that's where the reflection is going to come from. Everybody gets to have their own. It does require an awareness of the world because there's so much out there that we could learn. And creativity, and there's a whole essay in the Managing Ourselves book, is always about connecting things that were not otherwise connected. But you can't connect them until you find them. And if you stay in your lane, you don't find the weird things like anarchism in business to connect, to create new understandings. And then as Stash Kazmierski taught us, it's always adapting, not adopting. This is not finding your role model and doing what they do. It's learning from everybody to create your own understanding and your own life. The challenge as I have come to perceive it, of deep understanding is that it's really, in a way, about obliquity, which comes, I learned from John Kay's book called Obliquity. And what obliquity means is, if you pursue deep understanding directly, you'll never get there.
Huh?
So if you leave here going, dude, I got it, I'm going to get deep understanding, I'm going to have it done by Christmas next year, it won't happen. I didn't try to do this. It's doing these things and being open to the understandings when they come. A couple things and I'll finish up. I don't know if anybody knows this book. Blue Dog. You know about the Blue Dog? So I was gifted this.
Never seen that before.
I was gifted this by one of our veterinarians. And we have a lot of dogs at our house. My significant other farms, but took up dog rescue. Anyway, I never heard of it either, but it's actually quite famous. So it's the work of a painter whose name was George Rodriguez, who's a Cajun from Louisiana, who passed away a number of years ago. But he had a dog. So Jelly Bean Jump Up is named after my dog, Jelly Bean, who lived to be 17. And when she died in May of 2015, we wanted to do something in her memory, and we lived near a safe house, and they would see me running with her every day, and it just seemed like a good thing to do. His dog was named Tiffany. And when Tiffany died, as I experienced when Jelly Bean died, it's a big loss, man. And I'm not judging, in total honesty, it was harder for me when Jelly Bean died than when my mom died, because I talked to my mom once a week. I don't mean it wasn't hard, but those of you who have a dog, it's like they're there every day. You go home and it's so quiet. And that's what he went through. And this story of the blue dog is about him trying to deal with the emotion and the pain of all of that. And as I was working on deep understanding, I'm like, this story is deep understanding. Because I'm not going to tell you the whole story really, but he spent years trying to paint, because he was a painter, through the pain. And he kept trying these different things and none of them really worked. And what happened is, eventually, is that he was painting these yellow eyes on the blue dog, and that people would see the yellow eyes in the galleries, and they were drawn to the eyes, and they liked it. Just something resonated, and they found themselves through looking at these eyes. And so, on the back of the book, and it's in the book, but it says, to find her, this is about the blue dog, to find her, you must lose her. The blue dog knows the way. It's another version of the fairy door. Like, it's out there, but it took him years of struggle to arrive at that. And what he said is, even in the life of a dog, there comes a time when just one great idea can change the course of destiny. So in this room, in your friend group, in your family, on your team, there's people who will change the world by doing this work. And I don't know who they are, and neither do you yet. It might be you, it might be somebody else that you know. A few last things, and I'm wrapping up. So one is, I'm going to suggest that companies or businesses or nonprofits also can arrive at deep understanding, and that most of the ones we admire have done that. Rich isn't here from Menlo, but I'm going to say that they're somebody who's done that. They came up with those 4 things. And they have become more grounded within themselves by not following the path everybody else was following, and now they're known for it. But great businesses, great organizations don't just make a lot of money. I'm not down on money, but that doesn't get you deep understanding. It doesn't change the world, and it doesn't change you. Number 2, the people who attain deep understanding feel good. Their lives are imperfect. I got problems and pain and fears like everybody. I'm not saying it so arrives in nirvana. It's just that you feel good within yourself. And that people who feel good within themselves and are thinking for themselves, which is what this requires, make healthy democracy. We've been raised to follow the leader and do what we're told, or rebel once in a while, and neither of those creates healthy democracy. And this is what I studied in school. So it all comes full circle. So if we want democracy, we need to do this kind of work, because people who are doing this kind of work are trying to make great things happen. They feel better about themselves, and they're contributing to the people around them. I want to just add that I have also come to believe, if I can find the last sheet, that there's something that you could call that there's also deep disunderstanding. And that absence of deep understanding does not cause the heart to grow fonder. It makes it grow angrier. Because people feel rootless, unfulfilled, and eventually, in many cases, they get angry. I mean, we all have anger, don't get me wrong, but they don't know how to channel it. And the disconnectedness, the absence of deep understanding, the absence of fulfillment can lead to anger. And deep disunderstanding is the inverse of this. It's in an existing area of knowledge. They didn't make it up. It's made more dangerous by combining it with other things. It causes grave harm to others instead of helping. And instead of, so my friend Sean Eskenazi, whose chocolate is awesome, and some of you know, on the 4th point of deep understanding, which is we become ourselves in a new way, he says that our vocation is very often the healing of our childhood wound. And I'm going to suggest deep understanding is when instead of healing your childhood wound to find vocation, we make our childhood wound the pain of the world. So we have a choice to pursue deep understanding or to pursue deep disunderstanding. It's convenient to follow people who teach deep disunderstanding because you feel like you belong, but in the end, it doesn't help. So I'm going to close with something from an area of study that I realized in hindsight was deep understanding for me, and that's the work around dignity, which some of you have either read the pamphlet or heard me talk about. I'm not going to do the talk now, but it's the same thing. I went into deep despair after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I didn't know what to do. I was very down. Eventually turned into 6 elements of dignity that have changed my life and that we teach within our organization. But this all started out of the people in Ukraine fighting for their freedom. And that's what I want to share with this work that's coming up for all of us around deep understanding. So that the demonstrations that started in Ukraine began by one guy with one idea who was willing to stick his neck out. He was an Afghan-Ukrainian journalist. His name is Mustafa Nayyam. On November 21, 2013, in opposition to the autocratic president, he posted on Facebook, "Come on, let's get serious. Who is ready to go out to the Maidan by midnight tonight?" That's the central square in Kyiv. You might have heard this term. And then he added the most important thing, which is likes don't count. So last weekend in Belgrade, in Serbia, 350,000 people demonstrated in a country of 6 million. They got nothing we don't have, so we can do it too, to get to where we need to be. The last thing is a quote from a woman who, Marcy Shore, the historian of Eastern Europe, interviewed the people who were on the Maidan, demonstrating every night for 4 months before the president fled to Russia. It's a woman whose name only has her first name, Anastasia. She said, "Everyone needs to decide. It is necessary to believe, and it is necessary to act." Today, it seems to me a time of responsibility for every person concretely. Every person is responsible for our future. Everyone. Everyone needs to decide. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for the chance to be here with you.